Hi, everybody. Welcome to Studio Bridge. We have a familiar face. I've done a fairly recent talk with Ashley Lovett, but I wanted to focus today, really focus on Ashley's bookmaking. And I think it's a really interesting talk and a kind of a different direction that I think is very healthy in the way that Ashley's developed this as a career advancement and a career move at a fairly early time when Ashley started this. So before we get started, just real quickly, give us a like if you can, if you're feeling generous. We do this. This is a visual arts passage product, and we do these for free to the industry, and it's always very helpful to when people acknowledge us. So today, Ashley, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Hi.
I wanted to do kind of a shorter version of just kind of background, and then really focus on the books. So I'm gonna read this. Known for her captivating ethereal artwork in chalk pastel, Ashley Lovett is an illustrator, writer, and gallery artist, inspired by folklore and mythology. I was
correct.
very fortunate to meet Ashley. Oh my gosh, my timeline is so messed up. I have, so much has changed in my life in the last 15 years, but I'm guessing
It's been about 10 or something like that. It's been a while.
10 or 11 years. And Ashley was a student with, after Ringling, was a student with us at my first online educational program, and got to see Ashley develop an incredible portfolio in that program and then put it to work.
Yeah.
And
I kind of got to know myself and my style and what I wanted to do towards the end of the program, which was nice. It was nice to figure out a game plan.
And that's actually, the goal of all the educational projects that I've made since 1995, starting with the Illustration Academy, is to help people from wherever they are, help them with a path to enter the industry. And ultimately that comes down to portfolio, building a portfolio that's functional for the industry. So with all that said, Ashley accomplished something else that most don't during that time period. It usually takes a little bit longer, but she developed a visual voice. She developed something that looked like she did it. And I remember it happening.
Which wasn't intentional. It kind of just happened, and that's just the way it goes. You just keep working on different media and projects, and then it just kind of, you start to figure out what you like. And I don't know what happened. It's just magic.
Well, I know what happened is you worked really hard and you were getting really good direction. And I remember being in a classroom in our portfolio class, and that class there was a pretty amazing group of artists in that class. Anita Kuntz and John Foster was part of that class, and I was part of that class. And I remember Anita pointing out something. It was just like the baskets and
I remember that too.
And I remember
that was such a while back.
but it changed. It was like a demarcation line of you.
It was, and I ran with it too. She pointed that out, and I was like, oh yeah, because it was about making expressive mark making with chalk pastel. Was like turned into my media of choice. I did everything under the planet, but chalk pastels or dry media just always came a bit more naturally to me, and I can work with it better. It makes more sense with me. Even picking up wet media like watercolor, and I'm playing around with oils right now, and I'm like, damn, I really like chalk pastels. It makes just more sense. But she pointed out some decisions I had made, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. And I had fun the way I had rendered out that particular illustration. So
Well, and at that point, the thing that was um, really interesting to me is that you could replicate it, and
Mm.
um, and it became something that was consistent with your work, and your work started to have voice to it. And
Yeah. Well, they
um,
say to, find out what you're good at and then try to do it on purpose. So it's basically what I did.
it was interesting because I remember John and Anita and I having a conversation about it, and it was like
Aw, I didn't know that.
it was like, the question was, can you do that? Can you continue to
Hmm.
read it? And I think after we didn't really have the conversation until you did a couple of follow-up pieces and you're like, she's got it. This is
Yeah.
something that's controllable, and she understood how she got there and how to move forward with that voice. And it was more than just material though, too. It was how you were handling, how you were drawing, how you were simplifying,
Hmm.
and editing what you were seeing. And
Yeah, I wondered. I mean, I leaned into my media because again, it just came more naturally. But even as I started branching out and doing more little projects for myself that were, say, in graphite or even digitally with my iPad on Procreate, I kind of wondered, like, does this look like me? And then I show it to my fellow artist friends, and they're like, yeah, I could look at that, even though it's done in pencil or digital, I can tell you did it. And I'm like, oh, well, good. I don't have to worry about that then.
well, that becomes, the power of the emerging artist. And I'm going to get more into this when we start looking at the Little Mermaid.
Okay.
But the power of the visual artist being recognizable, of knowing, seeing a new piece and knowing that person did it, is really powerful in the industry because it makes you memorable. Art directors, again, that's that's who we're doing this for. I mean, when you really break it down, and
Yeah.
it is art directors kind of rule our industry from the artist point of view.
And
And
I kind of wonder about that too, considering where AI art is going and having something that's more recognizable and then what's the generic. But yeah, I feel like style and having a voice is becoming that much more important
absolutely,
at this
uh,
stage.
personality, personal vision, being able to problem solve is going to be um, become even more important. I mean, from
Hmm.
when it was stock photography and digital illustration, stock illustration, stock photography, digital illustration, that was all happening, in the early '90s. Um,
Yeah.
Everybody was saying, oh, it's the end of illustration. But what happened was the illustration world took a turn, and it became a little bit more conceptual. It became more personal. There wasn't a need for for just a wrist or somebody that had great facilitation. It was
Hmm.
people that could do things that were personal and had a voice. And I think it's
Yeah.
going to be, I think we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but
Oh yeah, that's a totally other topic we could
yeah,
talk about for 3 hours, I bet. But
but we're not going to. But
yeah, we got other
yeah,
things to talk
yeah,
about.
we got other things to talk about. But my short answer, or my short opinion about all that, is just dig into you, dig into what makes you
Hmm.
you, and
Yeah.
and defend yourself, separate yourself from others. Um,
Hmm.
Part of we brought up art directors, and we brought up understanding the industry, and part of what we do in our education, as I said, is like we offer a path. We offer for wherever anybody, whatever skill sets they have, we have the ability. We have great artists teaching the program, like yourself.
Hmm.
You're going to be teaching ideation and visual
Yep.
storytelling, which I think is perfect for somebody that's a
Yeah,
bookkeeper.
and I'm excited. I mean, I went through the same things at Ringling, learning ideation. It was like an illustration second year, and then applying that throughout my career, ideation. And then I took Sterling Hunley's class just to kind of like brush up on it a few years back. And so I'm excited. I'm
Yep.
excited to share all this knowledge. So
Well, you do. It's something you use consistently, and you do it well.
yeah,
And I'm excited. I'm really excited to have you teach that class for us.
yeah, me
Um,
too. I'm excited.
so um, there's a little bit of a difference when we talk about the and again, we can start talking about your pursuit as an illustrator. First of all, you're based in Louisiana. I think when I met you, you were in Shreveport. But I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't moved that far. I mean, my family's here, and luckily, as of now, I travel enough, like to Chicago and Los Angeles for different conventions and stuff, and so I get to, get out. But I stay in my studio. I love my studio. It's worked out real well.
Well, I think it's very important to mention, that you were developing career
hmm
as a young woman, and I'm going to mention that
hmm
because you had a child kind of in the midst of a lot of really good things going on.
Well, it was planned. It was
Well,
planned.
I
I had my
understand
book
that,
and I had a solo show, and then I'm like, all right, let's go try to have a kid now because I just went all out.
but
I knew
uh,
things were going to slow down.
but but I think that's really remarkable. Something that as an artist, whatever it is, as an artist, you have to consider everything. If you want to make a living at this, there's so many things you deal with. You have to deal with your finances, you have to deal with location, you have to deal with
QuickBooks.
what your strengths and weaknesses is, and
hmm
relationships. And so family, and I just think it's so fantastic that you were able to accomplish all of that. I know that
hmm
you live with Matthew and Leon, your son.
Yep.
Matthew, your
Yep.
son.
These two.
And it's day to day. It's something that you organize, and something that you probably don't think anything about it anymore. It's just day to day. I know you have to deal with it, but it's day to
Oh
day.
yeah.
It's your life. But
hmm
you learned how to control it, and you learn how to
Well, it's
manage
it's
your
it's
business on the other side.
anticipating. Yeah, yeah. I knew, like, we were married for 8 years before we decided to have kids or started considering it. Um, and I knew what that was going to entail for my career and how much I would basically have to take off for at least 6 to 9 months. And once we got childcare this year, it's so nice. I'm finally able to do things the way I used to. Now I can't stay up till 2 a.m. working on what I want and then waking up at 9, and then maybe I'll make lunch, maybe I won't. Like, I can't do any of that, which I really miss. But I'm back to my mind being in the place I want it to be as far as thinking about projects and that next big thing. And now that I'm working on my own story and seeing how, yeah. So, but
But
yeah, we had a game plan for all that, and that's kind of what you have to do when you're doing freelance, because it matters where you live, what your finances are, how are you going to balance things, and that's just part of being your own boss and being a freelancer and working for yourself. Um,
you have
and
to
then I could go into different income revenue, like Patreon, convention, sales, commercial work, that's again, we could
well,
dive into that.
you have to consider everything. And
hmm
I really like to think that, part of what we do, and part of what you experienced with
hmm
meeting a group of artists that did that every day.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They made their living as they're predominantly professional artists that teach part-time, and that's what I want
hmm
the makeup of our program to be. I want people that are having great success in the industry because they can be accurate and current about industry information. They're great picture
hmm
makers, or the industry wouldn't be using them. Um, and I think it's so important for students to have the ability to ask questions, and to get, again, our program is a
Absolutely.
mentorship program, and to be mentored by people that are doing what they want to do ultimately.
hmm
So you're a perfect fit, and
Yeah. Well, it's a
I'm
like you said,
excited
it's a
about
little different where you're building your own projects to bring in your own income and kind of controlling the entire thing. And then we'll talk about the Little Mermaid book because that's pretty much what I did.
it. Well, I wanted to share, a group of pieces just so people have a background to
hmm
see what you've done.
Yeah.
And I remember when I really was, I was taken back seeing you at Spectrum, and I don't know what you did, don't
Oh gosh,
even guess
2019,
what year
I
it
think.
was. You had the Mermaid book there. And
Yeah, I talked to everyone about it as I was working on it. I made sure to give out postcards. So I'm like painting myself into a corner so I would actually do the project. But I would bring, as I was building it, I even brought up like a sample book that I had printed out at just like some just crappy paper, but it's enough that it was like the layout. And yeah, I get advice from people constantly. Like, cause
so
I worked on it for a good 2 years on and off because I had my other stuff I was working on.
you just said something that really got me. Is that, like, you put this stuff out there so that you would do the project, to make yourself
Yeah,
do the
yeah.
project.
I was
Explain that a
scared to
little.
start it.
That's really interesting to me. It's like I do little things like that. Is I had a group, I just recently delivering a group of paintings to somebody. In the last painting, I had not painted, I just showed it to you a few minutes ago. I had
Hmm.
not painted the bottom of it, but I made a commitment with somebody and said, hey, I'm going to deliver this to you on Friday. And
Yeah, you got to do
and
that to yourself with
and
personal projects.
you got to put yourself in a corner sometimes to make sure things get wrapped up and you stay on track.
I use conventions for that too, to make sure that I get a certain number of pieces completed. Like I'm going to Dragon Con Labor Day, and I want to have at least 2 pieces for the current book I'm working on finished, and I want them to be badass. They need to be awesome. So that's my recent thing that I'm
we
doing to
we
myself.
all have we all know ourselves, and we have our tricks to make ourselves
Yeah,
produce
I was very
well.
scared to start this project because before that, I did portraits. Like this is a great example. I love doing portraits. Like that is just, it makes me happy. And it's more than just my comfort zone. Like I love the structures of the face and figuring out ways of drawing that with expressive mark making, with the least amount of mark making or experimenting. And that's what I had fun doing. And I would sell these prints at conventions and people would be very intrigued by them. But my sales were not as good as other illustrators who were doing like full narrative scenes that kind of gave more for the viewer to chew on. And I was like, well, damn it. If I really want to sell work at conventions and make this worth my time and become more appealing to the doing commercial work for like art directors for book publishers, et cetera, I need to do like full narrative pieces, head to toe, tell a story, make it sequential, which is also sometimes tricky because that character has to look the same each illustration. And I hadn't really done anything quite like that yet. And it scared me, but I knew that was the next step. I needed to do this if I wanted to make more money, if I wanted to push myself as an illustrator, because you should always choose things that kind of scare you a little bit so you'll progress and build up. And so I made a postcard with mermaid on it. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to do a book. That's right, a book. And I had been thinking about, well, what's that personal project going to be? Because you're going to spend at least a year on it for something that big. I wanted like a big passion project, and I toiled with different ideas for about 6 months. Like I thought I was gonna maybe do something that had to do with like the carnival and doing like weird characters from the carnival. And I kind of play with that, and I didn't like it. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do like 12 more illustrations like this. It's not fun enough. I thought about doing a series where I studied flowers, and this was me leaning into portraits. Like, what if I were to do these like flower creature portraits, and then I could talk about the flowers? And I did 2 illustrations, and I got bored with that. So, but then I remembered back when I was with John for one of his classes, we were doing portfolio pieces, and I had chosen a Little Mermaid. And I'm like, oh, let's look at like the public domain story, which means no copyrights. And so this is rewinding several years back. And as I read the original story, I'm like, oh man, this is really dark. I don't know if that's a good fit right now, because at the time I was doing children's books and I was going a more happier route. And when I read the original, I'm like, this is very dark. I don't mean she has to have her tongue cut out which is the most gruesome part of the whole story. But, she has to have her tongue cut out for the potion. And the story's about a mermaid she's fascinated by humans, but she also wants a soul, because mermaids don't have a soul. But if she were to become human and union with a human, then that human would share their soul with her, and she would live on forever. And so anyway, I'm like, too dark, gonna shelf that. Well, several years now go by, and now I'm thinking of this big, what's going to be this next big personal project. And I remember The Little Mermaid. It's dark, and I had shifted my portfolio to things that I realized I enjoyed doing more, doing things that were, more, I say dark, but it's about finding a moment in time that's finding beauty in a dark moment, whether that's a moment of desperation, or even in this picture that you're showing right now, I imagine it's this person who has this secret and someone tried to silence them, but they still have this energy. They're dead, but they're a ghost. But anyway, so my work had become much darker, and I'm like, oh, it's perfect. It's perfect for my aesthetic. I love drawing flowy, organic lines. I love drawing hair, because that's just what I have always gravitated to. And so I really leaned into my strengths when I decided to take on The Little Mermaid. Mermaids are very flowy. My work since college always would take on a very luminous quality to it. I don't know why. It's not intentional. It's just the way I perceive things. And I guess it's just what makes me tick. But I love pieces that have that luminosity to it. So I'm like, oh, let's make their hair glow. They are deep sea creatures. And again, leaning into my strengths. And so here I was. I had a story. It was public domain. And John, you had asked a question about how do you look up public domain?
Before, because we're about to jump in and really to talk about how you organized it, how you
yes, I'm
it,
getting away from myself, but yeah, that's how I chose the project.
But before that, you were, from what we taught and what we teach in our program is a very, understand the industry at the high level and establish outcomes. I think artists, they're not really that good at that, of establishing an outcome that relates to themselves and what is needed in the industry. And
it takes time. Sometimes it takes time to know what you're good at, what you like doing.
You got to learn a lot about the industry. You got to learn a lot about yourself too. But as we do in our program, the traditional of identifying who buys this work, who the art directors are, and doing that. And you were doing all of that. But then you really kind of doubled down when you started this project in a very contemporary form, maybe not as contemporary now, by using crowdsourcing and Kickstarter.
Yeah, no, it was a little pretty fresh when I started, Kickstarter and all that.
And so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. So here we are at the Little Mermaid. And first of all, you kind of talked a little bit about why you chose this story.
Because which is the hardest part, I think.
And you did some editing, you did some writing, correct?
Yes, yeah. The story itself was outdated. It was kind of hard to read. So I updated the language, and I made her relationship with the prince healthier. They didn't have any dialogue, so of course I added that. There's also some action scenes, like when she's rescuing the prince, and there wasn't a whole lot about that, and so I really wanted some strong visuals. So I would say it's an adaptation, but I definitely added my own elements, like the glowing hair, and she has a skull collection of creatures from above, like bird skulls and human skulls.
Well, the biggest difference, seeing you at that Spectrum Live event and seeing what you were doing, seeing examples of the book, was you chose something that was a little bit of a non-traditional. Instead of pursuing a publisher, you pursued making the book yourself and putting it out there, getting it funded. I mean, that's a lot of lifting on its own. I think a publisher came in later, correct?
They did. Yeah, no, it was, and that was the end goal for the project, is I wanted to build this beautiful book. And it was two versions. I had the collector's edition, which is basically what I wanted. and I'll talk about what that was. And then I had the more affordable, smaller trade edition that was, but yeah, that was the end goal. I wanted to build this beautiful book, fund it on Kickstarter, and then try to see if a publisher was interested. But it happened way faster than I thought it would. I was just networking and being at the right place at the right time, I do think, because this publisher was there when one of their artists was at this convention, and they introduced me. And I was also able to negotiate a better contract because I had it was done. I had the InDesign files ready, and so I was able to
What's
negotiate a bit
interesting
more
about
money.
that is not, it wasn't accidental that it happened. It wasn't like a discovery. Is you put yourself in the right place. You put yourself with a
Yeah,
really good product, and you immersed yourself into opportunity. And
pretty much. That's a good way of putting it. Everyone knew I was working on this book.
right.
Like, it's been known, and then I had it, and then because they knew me and my work and they liked it, they're like, hey, let me introduce you to someone. That's kind of how it panned out.
Well, I have a few of the images from the book here that I just wanted to, this is, I just wanted to pull this from letting you know that it was kickstarted, and some gorgeous imagery and really, really fun visual storytelling. And of course, this book's going to succeed. It's beautiful.
Thank you. It was a labor of love, that's for sure.
But this was that's a really big lift, early on in your career, doing a complete book, controlling everything, getting it crowdsourced, getting it published. I mean, everything. There's so much beyond the artwork. There's so many moving parts around it.
There are, but you can take it in steps. You get your idea, and then, you're alone in your studio, and you at least just get one image done, and then talk about it with people and bounce ideas off your friends, fellow students, and teachers. And it seems like a huge project, but the way it was just in steps. Ultimately, it was imagining I was given this project by an art director, and then choosing the imagery of how it would be told, how the story would be told, what would be most important. And then luckily I have a model, and her husband was very willing, and we took photo reference, and then some of those flopped, and they just didn't work out. That's the one thing about working on your own project. You can at least, it's easier to fail and be like, nope, this was terrible. And then you don't even use those reference photos anymore. We don't use that concept. Like, I had a different idea for this particular image. That was a night scene, because the idea would be her hair was shifting from glowing to solid, because I wanted the book, the first half, to be the mermaid, which is a white figure on a dark background. And when she turns human, it's a darker figure on a very airy background. So I did an invert, I inverted it. So that was one design idea. And my original one just was terrible. Didn't work at all. So I had to scrap it. But yeah. It seems like a big project, and it is, but when you take it in the proper baby steps, I mean, you can do it. And then towards the end, it's just about getting those final opinions and then sourcing your manufacturer. And I ended up going with a company that was local, which was very helpful, because I saved on shipping, and I was able to control the quality. And the guy who owns this place is amazing. He's so kind and excited about the project too. And he let me do all kinds, here, let's do several prints until you're happy to get that color just the way you want it.
So I guess one of the more difficult things in doing this, because as you're kickstarting it, I mean, you weren't finished with the book when you started kickstarting it, right?
I was, I'd say 75% done, but oh gosh, I will say the actual running of the Kickstarter, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. Gosh, because you have to.
I've seen quite a few people fail doing that, and then come back and saying, "Oh man, I didn't consider this. I created way too many assets."
I talked to a lot of people who did, particularly books, so I wouldn't fall into the same traps that they did or they saw other people, because I didn't want that. I want my customers to be happy and to be seen and to be transparent and to hit my deadlines. And the only snag that I had was my first book stack of books, they were damaged when they came in. And so I had to get them reordered, and they were manufactured in China. And the way I found this manufacturer was through another fellow artist, friend of a friend kind of thing. And he had a company. And so he was like the middleman. That worked out perfectly fine. And everyone was very understanding. Like, I showed pictures of the damaged books, and we had to, so the deadline of everyone getting their stuff was pushed by 2 months. But I landed all my shipping because I gave myself a huge safety net. So actually, if I didn't end up using my safety net, then that just meant profit for me. And I'm very happy with how much I made from the project. And then also had a product that I'm still selling today. Well, not the ones from the Kickstarter. Now I buy them from my publisher. I get like a discount, and then I sell those books, the second edition of the Little Mermaid. But
So
yeah,
what are we looking
a
at
ride.
here? This is
So
the,
this was the trade edition. I had two different versions because I just had to make life difficult for myself and do two different formats. I just knew I really wanted, the collector's one, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then I wanted one that was more affordable, like in the $30 range. And this is the one that had the damaged pages, but it was very beautiful, 6x9 hardcover with a foil stamp. And you have to research all of these things. But as long as you just just take it in steps. It's just like making anything. You just got to take it in steps. And yeah, so I formatted it, had the InDesign files. I even sent pictures to the manufacturer in China. I was able to mail them and say the value should look close to this. And it gets tricky when you're working with different types of paper too. So I got a hardcover, but yeah, it turned out beautiful. It really did. I'm pleased with the final result. And I did design the cover myself too. That's not something I thought I'd be able to do. And I want to highlight that. So much of this project, I questioned if I could pull it off. I did, because I knew how much work it was going to be. And I knew I was doing imagery I'd never done before. And I don't normally do like cover stuff like that where it's just a flat shape and I had to stamp it. I don't do that kind of stuff. But when I got to that stage, I just took it on, and sometimes it took me longer than I had hoped, but I got there. So just do it, basically, is what I'm saying. You'll figure it out. And if you're bad with Excel, like the financial thing, find a friend who's good at it, or a family member. I just happen to be, I'm good with Excel sheets and making sure I'm considering everything, shipping and yada yada. So, and it gets even more complicated whenever you add on like stretch rewards, because then you have to consider shipping and what you're shipping and how much more weight that is. But again, just take it on in steps and you'll figure it out.
I find it fascinating because, number one, again, I mentioned you'll be teaching with us.
Yep.
It's another avenue, and it's something else to offer to our students of like, this is a direction. If you want to develop something like this, if you want to go this route, here is another avenue to do it. And it's not
absolutely
just,
yeah.
The traditional way of pursuing as an illustrator is, pursue art directors, pursue the venues and the companies, and making a commitment of making a big project yourself again, it's a big lift, but it can have a big payoff to it also.
Well, pretty much most of what I do is my own branding, and there are other artists that make, do even more than I do. My work does work for a more niche market because it's, it's a bit darker, but people who do more happy imagery, I mean, they're just making images that they love doing and selling that artwork as prints at conventions and in their store and doing tutorials and doing Patreon. I know lots of artists who that's how they make their living, is solely that. So if you don't want to rely just on commercial artwork. I mean, it makes sense to have multiple things, multiple
Absolutely.
sources of income of your own making.
Right. I know you have gallery shows. I know you do all kinds of
Yeah.
your work to make, again, it's all part of your living. And but to do that, you have to, number one, you got to be good. I mean, that's the first thing. You got your artwork has to be,
you have to have the work ethic for it.
You got to have the work. You got to have the work, that's at the level it needs to be. But then you really need to understand the opportunities are there. And then, that really comes down to establishing outcomes. It's like, okay, so I've seen other artists do this and it's working for them. And that's not right for everybody. But, one of the things, the way I get trouble both from the students, they really enjoy it and understand when they first see the layout of our program. Every 10 weeks, we have 6 guest speakers. We have people come.
I know, it's fabulous.
And I think that is, they're concerned, well, I want to be focused on my assignment. And it's like, hey, this is a part of your education that you're going to need as much as the facilitation of the picture making. You're
guaranteed to get at least 5 truly great nuggets of advice that can apply towards anywhere in the industry. So you're really like missing out on that.
Yeah, well, having seen how other artists have done it, one of the reasons I do these talks all the time is exposing people to opportunity. And you see an artist and it's it's like, from just looking at their work, sometimes you can't figure out exactly how that relates to a career. But when you listen to an artist talk about how they developed and how they
it's fascinating to see how they start and where they got,
and how they put it to work and what it means to their career. So this is the collector's version for this, correct?
Yes. So this is my baby. So the company I worked with, he's a photographer. So he would put together like photography books for like wedding albums and stuff. And the pages themselves are like as thick as a quarter. And they have a soft touch finish and it lays flat on the table so the illustration doesn't get distorted. And the values, the ink is just lovely. It was archival inks, and he just did, they were just gorgeous. And I think they were like 200 something a piece. So they were collector's books. They were limited edition. And that's what I wanted to do from the get-go. But I'm like, well, that's not going to work. I gotta have an affordable option as well. And I was very happy. We sold about 50 of them, which for me, out of, being new to this, I was more than happy with having 50 that sold. And then I had like these super duper collector's editions that came in like a package. And I had Christine and Colin Poole, who I'm sure you're familiar with. Absolutely. They had just started doing these little bird skulls, and they gifted me 4, which I get so emotional thinking they were so kind. And I'm so glad I actually just had breakfast with them when I was in Los Angeles for Monsterpalooza, and got to catch up with them better because I haven't done a proper catch up with them in like 2 years. They're so kind. But we did a collaboration, and I got these little bird skull sculptures, and had a box made for them, this little music box, because Little Mermaid music is a concept they don't have under the sea. I'm trying not to refer to the Disney version, but so I did a music box that the bird skull like set inside of, and that came with the collector's book. And the box was custom made by like a carpenter here in town, a master carpenter. And I sold those, I think, for like $550. 550. Like they were like nice little sets, and I had 5 of them, sold all of those. So that's great. And for my next project, I'm going to try to do something similar, because the idea would be like the people who invested in the book, back in, this is 2019, I want them to be able to put my next book that I'm working on right now on a shelf right next to it, or on their coffee table right next to it.
So I'm giggling thinking about we kind of edited some photography and some slides before we started
Yeah.
talking today, and you were like, no, this one has to stay in because you can see
Yeah.
the thickness of the book, of the
Yeah.
picture and the quality
I
of the
love
book.
it. It's just so
But
beautiful. And I love books. I love beautiful books. I think, I romanticize the relationship between illustration and the written word. And that's the other reason why I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this project and make it beautiful.
okay, so um, next up, the Book of
We're
Fairy Tales.
working on the next book. Yeah.
And
It's
so
the
tell us, I have some things that, this, I just pulled this from the website. I have
yeah.
some things, some imagery here. It will be, the stories will include Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty. Is it just these three, or is there
Mhm.
any more, or is it
Yeah. Well, so I'm calling it the Book of Fairy Tales. That title might change. I'm actually going to talk to my publisher to kind of get their insight on the best title, because I know with the Little Mermaid, unfortunately, it's gotten like buried amongst all the other Little Mermaid stuff, which is not something I considered when I did the title The Little Mermaid. I could have done a variation, but yes, I was trying to think, okay, what's that next big project? I finally shipped out all the books in 2020. And I'm like, I wanted to take a bit of a break, but my mind's ticking and I'm thinking, what's the next thing? So I was like, oh, well, what if I stuck with a format of using public domain and I choose a bunch of fairy tales and do some illustrations for them? Let's take a break. I don't have to do anything sequential. I don't have to tell a story. I don't have to struggle with narrative. Let's just make things a little easier on ourselves. And so I started looking at these public domain stories, which you can find out what's public domain. You can actually go to the Library of Congress. I mean, we all know how to use Google. You just get several sources to make sure that it is public domain. And you can literally check with the Library of Congress if you want to make sure. Anyway, well, I started looking at these stories of like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and all these stories, and oh my, they're lame. They are so lame. Like the characters are no fun. They're like getting married off at 13. And I just couldn't pull any real inspiration from these stories. And I felt kind of like I was blessed to have discovered The Little Mermaid because I loved her character. Because although she was naive about her situation, she was very passionate and fierce and kind. Like, and I just couldn't get that same feelings for these lame characters. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I even played around. I've done like concepts for all these other ones and tried to pick ones that I was kind of okay with. But I just realized that I was not gonna, my passion was not there, and that would show in the final product. So I decided I would have to do my own writing. So I went from giving myself a break to taking on something I've never done before. And I love reading. I do more audiobooks because I work while I listen to audiobooks, and I have my favorite authors, and I'm like, well, it's the only way. It's the only way I'm going to build something that I'm going to actually love working on. And it was the truth. And so I decided I would just take the bones of three stories, Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White, and connect them all to where they all have like the same villain. And the stories deal a lot with like grief, because at the time whenever I was building this, they say it wasn't my intention to make that kind of part of it where all the characters are struggling with a version of their own grief, and that is in turn intertwined with their curses. But I was going through a lot at the time, and they say write what you know, and I just organically it just turned into that. And in a way, I think that's kind of beautiful, because now I'm making something that I'm that much more invested in. But yeah, I'm very excited. I've already fleshed out a lot of the imagery. The one you saw before was Beauty and the Beast, and this character is his curse has to do with like his garden, and over time it overtakes him. His horns keep getting bigger, and he was cursed by these two fairies. And I could dive in deep about all the different things that I've come up with for it, but I finally have the outline completed. And now I'm just fleshing out the imagery and going back and forth between imagery that I really want to make and then figuring out how I can meld that into the story. So
Well,
that's what I'm currently working on.
well, I think that's great, because at the end of these talks, I always give somebody an opportunity to promote what their next project is. And so we have actually some really good, some fun examples that I pulled from the website that are doing that, that are promoting the book of fairy tales.
So I will say, going back to the subject of Kickstarters, when I first did the Little Mermaid, I've never ran a Kickstarter before. So I made sure to do, I did a small print run first. So I could understand Kickstarter, give myself a very small project to understand my budgeting and all that. So I did that. And then I told everyone, hey, a year later, we're going to have a book. And we did. I say we, the collective we, like me, myself, and I. And then when I decided what the next book would be, you know, the Book of Fairy Tales, I completed this illustration of Beauty and the Beast and then ran that as a Kickstarter. Say, hey, we've got a print. And I offered an open edition, a limited edition, and then a really beautiful exclusive to Kickstarter hand embellished one. And got, so all the people who are invested in Little Mermaid were notified of that. And I built up and I made sure I did a big social media promotion to where I was posting stuff every 3 days and showing my process work and all that. And that was almost a year ago. I think I launched it in September. And so I'm thinking, I initially had wanted the book to be done by like now, but I made it into a much bigger project. And so I'm likely going to launch another print run just to be like, yep, it's still a thing. We're working on it. Here's another image that's going to be in the book. And that'll probably launch that in August as well. That way I can get everything shipped out before the mad rush of like, you know, Black Friday and stuff. I never ship things in November. Just don't do it. Like late November, December, don't do it.
Well, what I find interesting about this is like, this is, you know, you're paying for your path to make the book. You're paying for your time. You're doing beautiful things along the way. But as I look at this, it's just very smart that you can use this as really buying time to make the book.
And it makes people invest in you and your vision and what you're working on. And I want to be like, hey guys, didn't forget about you. Hope you didn't forget about me. Here we are. And I do have a quarterly newsletter that I send out every 3 to 4 months, updating everyone with concept art and, you know, just to tell them where everything is. And I'll be sending out a new one here soon. And a link to that's on my website somewhere. If you go to Kickstarters and you click on the Book of Fairy Tales, you can just scroll down just a bit and there's a sign up. I'm going to be sending out more of those as my deadline for finishing the book gets closer.
That's ashleylovett.com, correct?
Yeah, easy enough.
And
these were some of the early like concept sketches for the Snow White character, which is going to be like the main heroine. And then with Sleeping Beauty, I'm doing a role reversal to where it's a prince and a princess, and he's well, I feel like we're running out of time and I could talk a lot about this book. But anyway, it's going to be good. And then I sent this to John because I really wanted to show it. There's this program called Freeform. And for those who have, I don't know about other platforms like the Android, but I know for iPhone, iPad, your MacBook, you can basically, it's like a board, like your own personal Pinterest board that you can click and drag images and even files on there. And then you can access it across all your devices. And it's been amazing. I've been like, I'll find something on scrolling on Instagram, take a screenshot, click and drag it onto the board. And then later that day, I can really digest it when I get home and see how it can apply to my project. But the big image that I'm about to start is this, again, it's Sleeping Beauty. And so it's a prince and a princess, and the prince has fallen asleep due to a curse, and the princess is making her way through an enchanted forest to rescue him. And this was my initial sketch. She has this magical amulet that pretty much saves her from being killed, but she's still stuck in this forest, and she is basically being confronted with this kind of monster fae that's like trying to decide whether she should kill her or not. But she has a magical amulet that's kind of given her a bit of protection. And so I was trying to think of like this kind of protection spell, and then I got my model Megan to come over, and we took a bunch of photos. And you could kind of see that in the previous slide when I was talking about freeform. And once I Frankensteined my reference together, then I started working like digitally on top of my reference photo. And then I went full on digital, because my design language is different when I work from like my sketches. I can't go from my reference photo and transfer that onto a drawing board, because it's going to turn out like garbage. Which would have been nice because I could skip some steps, but I'd end up sabotaging myself later. But yeah, this is the current illustration that I'm about to start. She's basically been captured. I decided it made more sense to make it an actual like rooting spell, like kind of like in RPGs, to where she's been captured. And I got to play with all these really wonderful implied lines, and there's just a lot of good flow in this particular piece. And you can even, ideation, I wanted to apply that in a way that I wanted to find all the things that make the forest scary. So thorns and vines and spider webs and snakes. So I've got like scale patterns, and it's as if the forest has come alive and she's trapped, and now she's being confronted by this monster. And the only thing that's keeping her from being killed right now is this amulet. And yeah, I'm very excited, and I wanted it to be a center pose because a lot of book covers have that, and I thought that would make the strongest image. But anyway, I get excited. I talk a lot about this stuff because I get excited.
You wear your excitement on your sleeve. I think that's good.
I do a bit.
No, I think that's good. Passion and emotion, right? So again, Ashley, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the talk. It was great.
Look forward to the new project, the Book of Fairy Tales, and I'll also, check out Ashley's class with visual arts.
Come join me in my class so we can make some gorgeous artwork together.
All right, Ashley, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
John.
You're awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good week. Bye.
Bye.